Good morning, Shadydale Church of God. Trust everyone is doing well today. And again, Happy New Year to you. Today's lesson is January 9, 2022. This is week 6 of our Sunday school lesson. And our subject is not forgotten. And what our study is going to be about today is people sometimes face situations that feel hopeless. Genesis shows that even though Hagar and Ishmael's um, criticism changed, God was still with them. I'm sorry, circumstances changed. Even though Hagar and Ishmael's circumstances changed, God was still with them. So our Bible passage will be found in Genesis 21, verses 8 through 20. The topics to be discussed will be disagreement, patience, understanding, and peace. Okay, so let's take a look at the Bible background. It says today's Bible passage focuses on difficulties that accompanied the arrival of Isaac in the family of Abraham and Sarah. Isaac's birth led to tension and jealousness between Sarah, Isaac's mother, and Hagar, the mother of Ishmael. Sarah felt that Ishmael's status of Isaac's older half brother would endanger her son's right to his inheritance and to head the great family the Lord had promised to generate through Abraham. So Sarah complained to Abraham and urged him to send Hagar and Ishmael away. How God dealt with the situation reveals something about God's ongoing patience and continued concern for everyone involved. Hagar was discouraged, but God promised to continue to care for Ishmael. Okay, so that's our Bible passage, and just a couple comments right there, real quick. Um, most of us know the story. Abraham was promised a son of many nations by God to him and his wife Sarah. They got tired of waiting, and Sarah told Abraham to take a handmaiden and get a son through his handmaiden, and so he did. He took Hagar, and they made a son Ishmael, and then like I think it was like 12 years later, Isaac was born, and that's where we come in now. And so Sarah, now all of a sudden that she has this child, now she's jealous of the first child. So I'm saying all that to say this: two things. Number one, be careful what you ask for, because God just might give it to you, right? So Sarah asked Abraham to go ahead and take a handmaiden to get a son. They got a son. Now they have their own son. Now there's a problem. Number one. Number two, when God makes a promise, he has to keep his promise. Okay. And he doesn't need help from us to fulfill that promise. Okay. So with that being said, let us move on. And we're going to get to our Bible reading now. Okay, let me get to the screen so I can share that with you. Bear with me. Okay. All right. And our Bible passage will start at Genesis chapter 21, verse 8 through 10. This is out of NIV.
The child grew and was weaned. And on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking, and she said to Abraham, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac."
Okay. Although the Lord had promised descendants to the elderly Abraham and his wife Sarah, they eventually grew impatient in waiting. At Sarah's suggestion, Abraham went to Hagar, her slave. We tend to focus on this as an immoral act, but it was acceptable in the culture of that day. Hagar conceived and gave birth to Ishmael, but Ishmael was not the child of promise. And 14 years later, see Genesis 16, 15, and 16, also chapter 17 and 1, and verses 15 through 25, and then chapter 21, verses 1 through 3. Sarah finally gave birth to a son who was named Isaac. He was, as was customary in the culture, Abraham held a feast on the day that Isaac was weaned, meaning moved from drinking breast milk to solid food. At the celebration for the young Isaac, Sarah saw Ishmael mocking and making fun of the little boy. Sarah was jealous and fearful for her own son's place in Abraham's heir, um, as Abraham's heir. She told Abraham to get rid of the slave woman and her son, Hagar and Ishmael, because she did not want Ishmael to share in the inheritance with Isaac, as it would be legally possible. At the time of celebration, a time of celebration had turned into an occasion of resentment and animosity. Okay, so again, be careful what you ask for. So basically, this was backfiring in her face. She asked for this to happen, it happened, and now all of a sudden she doesn't like it anymore. Okay, and so and like it was 14 years. I said 12 years earlier, so pardon me on that. But the thing of it is this. Again, when God makes a promise, we don't have to try to fix it. Okay, we need to accept God's will and let Him do what He does best. Okay, so let's move on with the lesson. Okay, we're gonna go with verse 11 through 14 now.
The matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son. But God said to him, "Do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring." Early the next morning Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He set them on her shoulders and then sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered in the desert of Beersheba.
Okay, Sarah seemed to have little compassion for those who might treated her son's inheritance in place in the family, who had threatened her child's inheritance and place in the family. Abraham seemed genuinely distressed by Sarah's request to send away Hagar and Ishmael, although it appeared he was most upset that the request concerned his son. He surely had concern about Hagar's well-being as well. Abraham's reluctance also may have been due to the fact that the culture of the day frowned on expelling handmaidens and their offspring after the wife of the household had a child of their own. Despite the injustice of Sarah's request, God instructed Abraham to honor Sarah's desire for Hagar and Ishmael to be sent away. God reminded Abraham that it was through Isaac that God's central promise would be honored. The Lord continued by stating that Ishmael would not be forgotten. The offspring of Abraham and Hagar would become the father of a nation and a people who also would trace their lineage back to Abraham. After receiving God's reassurance about the future and safety of Hagar and Ishmael, Abraham consented to Sarah's demand. Early the next morning, he sent Hagar and her son on their way with a small supply of food and water. The pair wandered in a dry and desolate area around Beersheba, at the southern edge of the territory well known as Palestine. Okay, so this was not in God's original plan, needless to say. And then at the same time, we find that Sarah was being mean, okay? And Abraham, he was kind of caught in the middle. He wanted to please his wife, but then at the same time, he didn't want to do what was wrong in the sight of God. He also didn't want to get rid of his son, nor his handmaiden. But the emphasis seemed to be more on the son. He couldn't just exile his own flesh and blood. And as he was wrestling with this, God came to him and told him, to Abraham, don't be, chill, basically. He says, go ahead and honor your wife's request. She wants you to exile these folks. Go ahead and do it. But understand something. Number one, the promise is through your son, Isaac. Okay, that's the promise that I made. But I am not going to ignore your son, Ishmael. So I'm going to take care of Ishmael and his mom as well. So they will actually have another nation that he will father. But don't worry about it. So go ahead and do that to keep the peace, right? Don't want no fighting and fussing. Keep the peace. Go ahead and do that. And so he did. He went and the next morning and took food and water to them and told them to go ahead about the way, keep confusion down. Don't want no drama, yada, yada. So they did. And so then they went out into the wilderness and ended up in Beersheba. Okay. So here we go with verse 15 through 20.
When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down about a bowshot away, for she thought, I cannot watch the boy die. And as she sat there, she began to sob. God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water, and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became an archer.
Okay. So, go ahead and read the commentary. It is believed that skins contained at the time held no more than 3 gallons of water. When the water in the skin was gone, Hagar felt that her son probably would die of thirst, so she left him under one of the bushes there and sat crying in the distance so that she would not have to watch Ishmael suffer. Okay. God heard the crying of Hagar's son, underlining the meaning of Ishmael's name. God has heard. God comforted Hagar and through an angel assured her that the boy's cries had been heard. She was to take Ishmael's hand, confident that he still would be the father of a great nation. These verses indicate God's love, care, and mercy towards even those who were outside the covenant relationship God was establishing with the future people of Israel through Abraham. At that point, a well of water became visible to Hagar. In fact, Beersheba became known down through the centuries as a source of water and a sanctuary for those in need of shelter in that desert country. And so Ishmael grew up in the desert between Egypt and Canaan. God was with him, and he lived as an archer or hunter in dry wilderness places. The nation would be a nomad people known for inhabiting the wild, desolate areas of the Middle East. So God made a promise, and he kept this promise. Even when things seem like our hope should have been lost. Okay. Hagar felt like we ran out of water, we're going to die. She hid her son, put her son under a bush and started crying. God heard her cries. Okay. Even though she was not the intended blessing or plan for God, that God had, God still took care of her. And he sent an angel to tell her not to worry. You're not being forsaken. I'm going to take care of you and your son. Go get your son and embrace him. And when she did, she was able to see there was a well of water. And God told her, said, look, I am going to establish a nation through your son. Okay. And so I'm just here to tell you that even when things seem like all is lost, all hope should be lost. When things seem like, you should just give up, you are not forgotten. Okay. You are not forgotten, which is the title of our lesson. God will not forget you. So here's the key. Don't any of us forget God. Amen. I trust you've been blessed by the Sunday school lesson on today. That's all I have for you. And tune in next week with our Sunday school superintendent, Reverend Nehemiah Newman, as he will be bringing you your Sunday school lesson. Thank you so very much. And remember this, I love you and there ain't nothing you can do about it.